stop what you're doing right now. Because if your brain never truly shuts off, if you replay conversations that ended hours ago, if you lie awake at 2 a.m. running through scenarios that may never happen, then what I'm about to tell you will change the way you see yourself forever. This isn't a weakness. This isn't anxiety. This isn't you being too sensitive. This is your brain doing something extraordinary, and nobody ever told you what it actually means. Welcome to Josh Word. Today, we go deep. Here's the paradox that nobody talks about. Some of the most intelligent, emotionally aware, deeply perceptive people you will ever meet are also the most exhausted, not from doing too much, from thinking too much. In the cruelest part, the exact thing that makes them brilliant, that restless, scanning, pattern-seeking mind, is the same thing quietly draining them every single day. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it maladaptive rumination. And before you write that off as a clinical term that doesn't apply to you, listen closely. Researchers at Yale and the University of Michigan have studied this pattern for decades, and what they've found will probably surprise you. People who ruminate, people who can't stop the mental loops, are not doing it because they're fragile. They're doing it because their brain is exceptionally good at finding meaning. It is always scanning, always processing, always searching for patterns in a world that doesn't always make sense. The problem isn't the intelligence. The problem is that the system never gets a signal to stop. Let's get into what's actually happening inside that head of yours. There is a region of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. It handles planning, analysis, self-reflection, the higher thinking stuff. In overthinkers, this region stays highly active even during rest, even when there's nothing to solve. At the same time, something called the default mode network, your brain's background processing system, keeps generating internal monologue. It's like having a radio you can't switch off, one that only plays your own voice, narrating, questioning, rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet. And here's where it gets fascinating. Your brain releases small amounts of dopamine during problem solving, even imagined problem solving. So every time you run through a scenario, analyzing angles, constructing arguments in your head, your brain is being chemically rewarded just for the activity, not for finding an answer, just for thinking. That's why just stop thinking about it is one of the most useless pieces of advice anyone can give. Your brain has a biological incentive to keep going. Telling it to stop is like telling a fire to stop while you pour fuel on it.
But here's what I really want you to sit with, because this is where it gets personal. For most overthinkers, this pattern didn't start in adulthood. It started in childhood, in environments where outcomes were unpredictable, where moods shifted without warning, where one mistake could have consequences that felt massive, even catastrophic. And so the young brain did what every young brain is designed to do. It adapted. It learned to think ahead, to anticipate everything, to run simulations of every possible outcome, because if you could predict what was coming, maybe you could protect yourself from it. Think about that for a second. Your overthinking is not a character flaw. It is a survival strategy designed by a brilliant nervous system that was trying to keep you safe. It is the most logical response to an unpredictable world, written in the code of who you are before you even knew you were writing it. Now, not all overthinking looks the same, and this distinction matters. Psychologists identify two types. The first is called reflective rumination. This is when you turn inward to understand yourself, to process emotion, to make sense of the world. When balanced, this is actually a profound strength. It is linked to higher emotional intelligence, deeper empathy, and the kind of self-awareness that most people never develop. The second type is brooding rumination. This is the darker one. It's the passive, circular dwelling on problems with no movement toward resolution, no conclusion, no relief, just the loop. And this is where overthinking starts to cost you, in sleep, in decisions, in the social anxiety that builds from replaying every interaction and asking yourself what they really meant. Here's the painful part. Most overthinkers drift between both types, sometimes in the space of a single thought. And because the thinking feels productive, because the brain is engaged and active, it can be almost impossible to notice the exact moment you crossed from processing into spiraling. Cognitive psychologists call this the illusion of mental progress. You feel like you're solving something, but you're just looping, burning energy, going nowhere. But I need you to hear this next part carefully, because this is the piece that most people miss. A 2013 study published in the journal Psychological Science found something remarkable. People who reported higher levels of rumination also scored significantly higher on measures of cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and predict how others think and feel. Overthinkers are, on average, more sensitive to social nuance, more aware of how words land, more attuned to the unspoken emotional texture of a room. They catch things other people walk right past. The very engine that makes overthinking so exhausting, that relentless, never-sleeping mind, is also what makes these people some of the most perceptive human beings alive. You notice everything, you feel the weight of every possibility, and yet, the more you think, the harder clarity seems to become, because here is the truth that psychology keeps returning to. The mind cannot think its way out of every problem. Some things have to be felt, some things have to be decided, and some things have to simply be released, not solved. So what do you actually do with all of this? Therapists who work with chronic overthinkers don't focus on silencing the thoughts, they focus on changing your relationship to them. There's a practice from acceptance and commitment therapy called cognitive diffusion, and it is deceptively powerful. Instead of merging with the thought, instead of treating the thought as reality, you learn to observe it from a slight distance. Instead of, this situation is dangerous and I need to figure it out right now, the shift becomes, my brain is generating a concern. That's what it does. It doesn't mean I need to act on it. One pulls you into the spiral, the other gives you a fraction of distance, and that fraction, small as it sounds, can be the difference between a sleepless night and finally being able to breathe. Here's what I want to leave you with. Overthinking is not instability, it is not weakness, it is not evidence that something is broken in you. It is a highly active mind that learned to stay on alert in a world that once felt uncertain. And the challenge, the real work, is not to silence that mind, it's to teach it, gently, that it is finally safe enough to rest. You carry patterns shaped by experiences you didn't choose. Understanding them doesn't erase them, but it changes how much power they have over you. And sometimes, that understanding is exactly where it begins. I'm Josh Ward. If this hit home, share it with someone whose mind never seems to stop. They need to hear this today.
Before you leave, I want you to remember one thing. The fact that your mind never stops doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've spent years carrying responsibilities most people never saw, reading between the lines, preparing for storms that never came, trying to protect yourself from pain before it arrived. And maybe you're tired of replaying the past, tired of predicting the future, tired of carrying the weight of every possibility. But what if your greatest breakthrough isn't learning how to think more? What if it's learning when you no longer have to? Because the strongest minds are not the ones that never rest. They're the ones that finally learn they can. So tonight, when your thoughts start racing, remember this: not every question needs an answer. Not every possibility needs a plan. Not every fear deserves your energy. Sometimes, peace begins the moment you stop negotiating with every thought that enters your head. And if nobody has told you lately, you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to trust yourself. If this message spoke directly to you, don't just watch and move on. Subscribe to Josh Word and turn on notifications, because every week we explore the psychology, mindset, and hidden truths that help you understand yourself on a deeper level. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, protect your peace, trust your journey, and remember, your mind is powerful. Now it's time to make it free. See you in the next video.